Before dawn on October 16, 1946, 10 condemned men walked through Nuremberg Prison toward the gallows. They had directed the Third Reich. Now prison guards moved them through the half-lit corridors, one after another. The night had narrowed to procedure. The International Military Tribunal brought them to this point. From November 1945 to October 1946, the court examined documents, orders, testimony, and the record of occupation and war. 24 major war criminals stood trial. Their positions did not remove them from the charges. The tribunal named crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The hearings turned leadership into evidence. Decisions signed in offices reappeared in court as orders, reports, and witness accounts. The defendants heard the record assembled against them. Then came the verdicts. 12 men received death sentences by hanging. Only 10 men reached the execution chamber. Hermann Göring had died in his cell hours earlier. Martin Bormann had faced the tribunal in absentia and remained missing, presumed dead. Nuremberg Prison's former gymnasium had been prepared for the night. 3 gallows stood inside. Master Sergeant John C. Woods carried out the executions, while journalists, military officers, and Allied representatives recorded each step. Each condemned man entered alone. Hans Frank was among them. He had been Hitler's personal lawyer, then Governor-General of occupied Poland. Under his administration, millions of Polish civilians and Jews were murdered. Frank spent his final night in prayer with the prison chaplain. The record does not prove what he believed. It records his actions. In the last hours, the former Nazi governor prayed while guards prepared the room where he would die. At the gallows, Frank thanked his captors for their treatment. He asked God for mercy. The request came after years in which he had directed the occupation administration in Poland. Woods waited beside the platform. Witnesses watched. Frank was led to the gallows after his short plea for mercy. Frank had asked for mercy. Keitel kept his military bearing and repeated the argument of obedience. Wilhelm Keitel led the high command of the armed forces. His name stood beneath orders that broke the laws of war. One was the Commissar Order. It demanded the execution of captured Soviet political officers. At the trial, Keitel pointed upward. He said he had carried out orders from superiors. For him, obedience remained a soldier's duty. The tribunal rejected that defense. An order did not erase responsibility for the act it required. He did not change his position, not in court, not in prison. Keitel followed a strict daily routine during confinement and kept up his physical fitness. Then the guards took him out. He approached the gallows with the measured step of a soldier on parade. His hands shook slightly when the noose went around his neck. The posture remained. The argument remained. The Commissar Order stayed among the documents bearing Keitel's signature. Keitel's signature on an order did not end the record of the condemned. The next name came from the press, not a military headquarters. Julius Streicher had neither commanded troops nor directed a government office. His place in Nazi public life rested on a newspaper. For more than 2 decades he published Der Stürmer, a newspaper devoted to anti-Semitic material and racist propaganda. The medium was print. Each edition carried the same line beyond Streicher's own desk and into public circulation. Large anti-Semitic headlines gave his message a visible form, while repeated articles kept its racial claims in print. Year after year. His work was not a military command, and it was not an administrative post. It depended on pages, titles, and material made for readers. That was his role. Those texts did not require a military rank or an administrative portfolio. His newspapers supplied the printed material through which he spread racist propaganda. Streicher used Der Stürmer to repeat anti-Semitic claims over decades. Among the condemned at Nuremberg, this marked him apart from leaders whose authority came through armies or offices. Keitel's name remained tied to orders. Streicher's remained tied to printed propaganda. Streicher stood at Nuremberg as the publisher of Der Stürmer, after years of anti-Semitic publication. The verdict did not silence Julius Streicher's propaganda. After dawn, prison staff prepared the execution chamber and expected trouble from him. Guards had recorded his provocative remarks throughout imprisonment. Streicher showed no remorse. He still sought reactions. For more than 2 decades, his printed anti-Semitic propaganda had carried the same hostility. On the morning of October 16th, he entered the chamber in an agitated state. The guards' concern proved justified. He shouted the Nazi greeting, "Heil Hitler!" Then he invoked Purim Fest 1946, the Jewish holiday marking deliverance from persecution. Streicher added another threat. He said the Bolsheviks would one day hang those present. These were not words of regret. They repeated the anti-Semitic agitation he had spread for years. Master Sergeant Woods later named Streicher's execution among the hardest he carried out. No technical failure caused the difficulty. Streicher's conduct at the scaffold did. The trapdoor was ready. Streicher made another outburst. Guards placed the noose around his neck after his final shouts. After Streicher's noise ended, prison staff brought Ernst Kaltenbrunner from his cell. The next prisoner arrived quietly. Kaltenbrunner was among the highest surviving SS officers. He had led the Reich Security Main Office. That office directed the Gestapo, the criminal police, and the security service. Its orders reached across Nazi Germany and occupied territory. At trial, Kaltenbrunner denied knowing crimes committed by his subordinates. He presented himself as an administrator removed from their actions. The record pointed elsewhere. His office stood over the final solution and other Nazi crimes. Yet he kept repeating ignorance. Streicher shouted his hatred. Kaltenbrunner relied on distance, paperwork, and denial. During his final night, he wrote letters and arranged his personal belongings. Paper covered the cell. His movements stayed deliberate. Before dawn, prison officials prepared to take him to the execution chamber. Kaltenbrunner walked to the gallows at a measured pace. There were no outbursts. In his last statement, he called himself a victim of circumstances. He said history would clear his name. He acknowledged none of the dead under his authority. The letters remained behind. So did the personal effects he had arranged in his cell before the execution. Fritz Zalkel followed him from the cell block. His hands shook. The man facing the rope had once directed the fate of more than 5 million foreign workers. Zalkel held the post of plenipotentiary for labor deployment. Under his authority, German officials deported and enslaved workers from occupied countries. Men, women, and children left their homes under orders tied to his office. German factories then consumed their labor. More than 5 million people passed through that program. They worked under coercion. They could not choose their workplace, their movement, or the terms of their labor. Zalkel's directives reached far beyond a desk in Nuremberg. At trial, he called himself a reluctant administrator. He claimed he had tried to improve conditions for foreign workers. The evidence showed something else: his personal participation in planning and carrying out the deportations. His defense could not separate him from the program he directed. The courtroom record placed decisions beside consequences. Orders moved workers across borders. Families lost homes, income, and control over their own lives. German enterprises received laborers who had no freedom to refuse. Inside the prison, Zalkel no longer issued orders. Guards saw anxiety. They reported sleepless nights and a man who often appeared troubled. The authority he once held over millions had disappeared. In his final weeks, he turned to the prison chaplain. He sought spiritual counsel. That contact did not erase the evidence from the trial. It stood beside the record of deportation and forced labor. The morning of the execution exposed his fear in plain view. Witnesses saw a pale face and trembling hands as guards brought him toward the execution chamber. He needed support as he approached the gallows. His body no longer held the posture of command. Zalkel did not speak with Kaltenbrunner's measured reserve. He spoke about his family. He worried aloud about what would happen to them after his death. His words carried a plea for mercy, but the court had already weighed his role. He had directed a program that deported and enslaved more than 5 million foreign workers. Many were men. Children were among them. His fear belonged to one morning in prison. The program he directed had reached homes across occupied Europe and forced people into German factories. His final appeal could not change those orders. It could not return the lives controlled by them. Prison officials kept him standing through his visible distress. Then they carried out the sentence. Sokol was executed after conviction for the program of deportation and forced labor. More than 5 million workers had been deported under Sokol's authority. Jodl defended orders that reached millions more. General Alfred Jodl led the operations staff of the High Command of the Armed Forces. He stood among Hitler's closest military advisors. His signature appeared beneath numerous orders that violated international law. Those signatures mattered. At Nuremberg, Jodl did not deny his part in military decisions. He defended each decision in detail. He argued that military necessity had dictated what he signed. Keitel pointed to obedience. Jodl chose another defense. He presented the orders as military decisions forced by the war. The distinction was narrow. Jodl described necessity. The court examined the orders themselves. His position at the High Command placed his name beneath decisions with criminal consequences. He kept defending them. During his final weeks in prison, Jodl wrote what he called his historical testament. He set down his account of the war. He tried to justify his decisions before historians could judge them. He also wrote to his wife until the end. In those letters, Jodl described himself as a victim of political circumstances. He did not describe himself as a man responsible for war crimes. That view stayed intact. Prison officials saw him continue the task with close attention. The same papers that carried private letters also carried his defense of his wartime record. His final weeks became another argument over the meaning of his own signature. On the morning of the execution, Jodl appeared composed. He moved with restraint. Witnesses saw no public admission that the orders had been criminal. There was no retreat. At the trial, he had called military necessity his answer. In prison, he turned that answer into a historical testament. At the gallows, he reduced it again to duty. The rope was prepared. Jodl spoke of his duty to Germany. He said future historians would understand the situation he had faced. He offered no acknowledgement of the people harmed by the decisions he defended. His last statement followed the same line. Duty to Germany. Military necessity. His signatures remained outside that defense. When the executions ended, 10 condemned men had passed through the Nuremberg scaffold. Their final statements remained in the court record. Official witnesses wrote them down in the morning prison. The words differed. The verdicts did not. Some spoke with defiance, some expressed regret or religious belief. Others held to a professional tone until the end. Each statement stood beside the crimes named by the tribunal: crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity. The executions did not erase the documents behind them. Orders, signatures, reports, and courtroom testimony remained. They showed personal decisions made by named officials. The court examined those decisions one by one. It did not treat participation as a private detail. Wilhelm Keitel and Alfred Jodl tried to place their actions inside military duty. Both referred to orders and necessity. The tribunal rejected that defense in their cases. An order could explain the chain of command. It could not remove personal responsibility for criminal acts. That distinction entered the legal record with the executions. The documents preserved the final statements and the judgments together. Later courts and international law drew on those findings. Personal responsibility remained. Following orders was not a defense. After the verdict, official witnesses preserved the short final statements. Frank spoke of religious conversion and remorse. Keitel held to professional dignity without admitting what his actions meant. Streicher remained defiant. Seyss-Inquart offered no remorse. Their words differed. Their responsibility did not. Each statement entered the trial's historical record. Arthur Seyss-Inquart kept writing until the end. His papers offered political and historical explanations for his own actions. He had helped bring Austria under Nazi rule. Later, as Reich Commissioner in the occupied Netherlands, he governed for Germany. His occupation policies led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians. Dutch Jews were deported. The orders, reports, and consequences remained behind his written arguments. During the trial, Seyss-Inquart defended his record with the same language. He presented annexation and occupation as events demanded by history. In his final weeks, he returned to that position on paper. His correspondence focused on political analysis, not personal affairs. The prison officials saw pages of argument. The execution date kept approaching. On the scaffold, his voice remained calm. He offered no remorse for Austria or the Netherlands. He did not withdraw his defense. He still described Nazi policy as justified by the course of history. The final statement repeated the position he had maintained throughout the trial. No new explanation appeared, only the old claim spoken one last time. His role had reached far beyond courtroom language. Austria had lost its independence. In the Netherlands, German occupation brought deportations, executions, hunger, imprisonment, and civilian deaths. Hundreds of thousands did not survive the occupation. Dutch Jewish families were sent away under German authority. Seyss-Inquart's final words did not change those records. The execution sequence ended at 2:45 in the morning on October 16, 1946. The bodies were cremated. Their ashes were scattered in the Isar River. No burial site remained. The record moved from ashes to papers. Wilhelm Frick had helped write laws that stripped Jews and other minorities of their civil rights. Frick had joined the Nazi Party early. As Reich Minister of the Interior, he took part in preparing the laws of persecution. Each text turned political exclusion into an official order. Rights disappeared on paper first. The laws reached Jews and other minorities, then cleared the way for wider crimes against them. At the trial, Frick tried to narrow his role. He presented himself as a legal administrator who had only written down decisions made by others. The evidence showed his own involvement in drafting increasingly severe persecution laws. He had not stood outside those decisions. He had helped give them legal form. During his final weeks in prison, Frick kept returning to papers and written explanations. He sorted documents. He wrote defenses. Prison chaplains noted little interest in spiritual questions, while Frick remained focused on legal and administrative matters. The same language followed him to the end. He walked to the gallows calmly, already tired. His final words came in the dry, legal tone he had used throughout his career. The procedure remained his defense. The laws remained his record. Frick's preparation of persecution laws against Jews and other minorities.